Hey you guys, Mistover. This game dropped last night on the Switch, PC, and PS4. I spent last night's stream pretty much 8 hours playing the demo, and I'm really glad that I did because it didn't actually hit all the notes that I thought it was going to hit. Like, I saw a lot of the footage and I was so hyped for this game. Very hyped. I almost went straight for the purchase and not playing the demo whatsoever, and I'm so glad that I played the demo because I actually got a good taste for the game, and I've got a few thoughts right now. Maybe some of them will resonate with you guys, maybe some of them won't, but here we go. Firstly, from what little I saw of the story, it seems a little thin right now, a little bit kind of wishy-washy. Some kind of event has happened and the story is kind of being told to you by, a couple of the people that are living there in this kind of town that you find yourself in. And it's kind of, from the demo, there's not much there yet. So story-wise, can't really comment too much. The one thing that I will say, though, is that every single quest or expedition is kind of being told to you in such a way that it seems like it's a part of the bigger thing, but it's actually not. It's just like, can you go and collect these things for me? Can you kill 3 of these things? Can you kill 5 of these things? And I think it feels like they're trying to make side quests feel more important than they actually are. It would have been better to just keep the 2 to 5 minute conversations and dialogue sessions with the main characters of the game. Keep that to just the story alone, because right now you're having 2 to 5 minute conversations with characters who are essentially just asking you to get some mushrooms. And there's nothing wrong with the side quests. There's nothing wrong with filling out your game with side quests, but don't try to make it like it seems like it's part of the main story, because then it just dilutes the main story. It washes the impact of the plot away. Combat, I have some positives and negatives for the combat. Firstly, I kind of do like the way it's set up. Okay, it's a 3x3 grid on your side and it's a 3x3 grid on the enemy side. How you lay out your characters affects different kind of moves and the execution of different kind of moves based on the class of your characters, which I think is a little bit more like Disgaea. So if you're a fan of the Disgaea series, team moves, unit-based moves where you have this unit standing next to this unit actually unlocks this kind of move. That stuff is really cool, and I think that there's a lot of room for that to grow in the game. Classes actually don't feel that different right now. The good thing about Darkest Dungeon is that when you created a character or when you hired one of the heroes for your journeys into the dungeons, each character felt very different to play. Their skills felt different from each other, and that was a combination of how they looked, how much damage they did, whether or not they could even attack at all. Some just could not fight and were purely buffers and things like that. And it just so happened that all the characters, I played with a full team. I got all the characters that I could possibly get out of the demo, and they can all attack. They all have skills for the front row, middle row, and back row. Only some of them can heal, of course, right? That makes sense. When you give all characters the ability to attack all rows, it kind of makes them all the same, and it takes away the speciality of the classes. And especially because they all hit for roughly the same amount of damage. The mage, for example, was doing the same amount of damage as my healer, who was also doing about the same amount of damage as my paladin. In fact, the only class that was doing any more damage than anybody else was my rogue. I feel like that could get boring quickly because it takes away the uniqueness of every class. Now, visually, all of the artwork looks great. I love the artwork in this game. Very cool. Looks fantastic. It's very reminiscent of Darkest Dungeon. It looks like a combination of Darkest Dungeon and some kind of anime, which is really badass. However, when you got new weapons and armor, nothing visually changed, not even like a slight color change or anything like that. And that's something that Darkest Dungeon did do, and it was very cool to see even that tiny visual progression with your character. As time goes on, I'm hoping that first couple patches or something like that, there's at least some little visual updates to the characters, or perhaps maybe an overall class change, maybe an overall class level up or something like that. I hope that kind of stuff is in the works, because right now, not growing in any way, shape or form visually, I think for me is kind of a thumbs down. Now, I don't know why, but I actually thought when I saw all the footage for this game that the guts of the game, how the game was going to play and what it was kind of founded on, was something a little bit more like Darkest Dungeon. Now, there was sure some RNG in Darkest Dungeon, but Mistover is actually 90. From the small amount of the demo that I played, which lasted about 8 hours, it was enough to see that the bulk of the game is completely RNG based. It's not really about preparation, because even if you do prepare, some bad dice rolls, some bad enemy spawns, some bad loot spawns can basically determine whether or not you fail the quest. And to top it all off, if you do poorly in the mist, you lose time. I don't quite know how this works too much yet, so I can't really comment too much on it, but it does appear to be some kind of time limit on the game. If you do poorly, time advances forward. So you can't actually just spend a lot of time grinding in the game, leveling up characters, unless every time you go into the dungeons or you go into, the mist, that you perform well. And because that's RNG based, those two things really don't work for me. In fact, that bothers me a lot, because I don't like the fact that skill and careful preparation or decision making are the biggest factors in whether or not I survive or do well in the dungeon. I even last night ran into a situation where I was playing on easy because I wanted to see what the easy of this game was going to be like, and if the demo was short, I would have played it again on hard to see the difference. There was an interesting scenario that popped up where I had 3 enemy encounters in a row. Like, I barely moved a couple of steps, and the first fight went fine. The second fight, it kind of beat me down a little bit. The third fight happened, and it just so happened to be a very, very tough battle. And I thought, well, GG's, that's the end of me. I managed to win the third fight, but I used pretty much all of my resources on that third fight, and I was only maybe 20 to 30 steps into the entire dungeon. So with all of my resources depleted and only a tiny ways into the dungeon, being penalized for that just seems sad. It's just RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG, and then for me to come out of that dungeon or expedition and to be penalized with like a, hey, you did really poorly that time. Time is going to actually advance forward and we're now closer to doomsday. That kind of rubs me the wrong way. And lastly, the whole jinx system, which I think is kind of a homage to the system in Darkest Dungeon also. You see, Darkest Dungeon became almost like a game within a game. You managed all the negative traits that your characters picked up whilst in the dungeon. You would get characters who become infatuated with investigating dead things, right? They'd see corpses and they just couldn't help themselves. They were compelled to touch them. Why? Because one time you were controlling that character and you used that character to investigate this corpse, and all of a sudden they become infatuated with it. Maybe they would gain a bonus, but for most times they would get some negative effect. They would contract some disease, or their trait would progress in a negative way, and it was all linked, but it made sense. Oh, you touched that corpse, now you've got a disease. In Mistover, it's RNG based. You get to the end of an expedition and your characters all of a sudden have a bunch of random stuff that just happens to them. Stuff like, now their accuracy is down by 10%. Now that all of a sudden their accuracy is bad. That just doesn't jive with me at all. I actually found that a little bit annoying, to be honest, because it costs lots of money and time to reverse the jinx system. And it's like it just got bestowed upon me by RNG. Now the town hub has got some interesting stuff in there. There's a support store, which basically takes a bunch of the items that you pick up from inside the dungeons and uses them for things like extending the amount of food you have, extending the amount of light or luminosity that you've got in the dungeons. You can extend your recruit roster and things like that, which is actually pretty cool. I really do like that. I like that system. I like the fact that the dungeons are randomly generated. I like the art. I like the sound effects and the music. Really, right now for me, I would say that Mistover is one of the games that I'm just going to wait and see. I'm actually not going to purchase the full game. I'm just going to wait and see. I'll give it a couple patches, maybe a DLC. I will be watching really closely some other streamers and see how the full game plays, see, you know, where they're at after a couple days worth of playing, and what's progressed. Is the town, you know, can we build the town? Can we grow out the town? Do the classes change? Are there lots of classes? What does the combat look like after being 30 hours into the game? Are the dungeons growing infinitely larger? You know, I'd really like to see that. But yeah, for now, I'm just going to wait and see what happens. I think Mistover has a ton of potential. But yeah, I hope this was valuable for you guys. It's just my honest thoughts about where I'm at. I was hyped for the game, and after playing the demo, now I'm like, I need to see where this is going, because, you know, with right now it being so RNG heavy, it's kind of turned me off a little bit. But we'll see where it goes. Now, if you guys want to pick yourself up a copy, there is a link down below in the description. It's an affiliate link, so I earn a tiny little commission from that. I am genuinely watching with great interest.